Sometimes when you download an assembly from one of the FRC vendors, you get something that contains parts that you want, but you don't want the whole thing. And this is a great example of it. This is the Thrifty elevator. And I don't want this thing as an assembly because it's not the right size for me. I just want some of the component parts so I can construct my own. But there's a problem. All of this came in, even though it came in as some assemblies, this is not organized the way that I would want. Basically all of the parts in this middle stage, for instance, are in one giant assembly. And because it was imported, there are no mates. So if I open this up and I start moving things around, you can see there's no mates in this. And that poses a bit of a problem because with no mates and no sort of sub-assemblies inside of here, the parts that I want, I'm going to have to put back together myself. But there is a shortcut to this. So the trivial example is this fork assembly, this fork piece, and this pulley, I'm always going to use together. So I'd like to have these as one part. But if I open these, I'll have to make an assembly. I'll have to mate this in here. It'll be two mates. It'll take a little bit of time. So instead, I can click on the fork assembly, or the fork piece, shift-click on the pulley, right-click on this, and say Form New Subassembly. And that'll take these two parts and move them into a new assembly, and then insert that assembly back into this big assembly. And that's cool because now if I right click on this and I say open subassembly, you'll see that I've got something. This is essentially a component that I can drop into a design of my choosing. And yeah, these aren't mated in here, but they don't need to be. If you want them not to move, you can shift click on everything over here, right click and say fix. And fix will just lock them in place wherever they are. So that's a good way to do it. It's a good way to get around it. And if you do a save as, it'll say, yeah, it's being referenced by the other document, so this is going to replace that with whatever you save that as. That's okay. We don't care about that assembly. We're just using it to get the parts. So let's say this is pulley assembly. Let's go back to middle stage. I'll show you the medium example. Medium example is this spool for the constant force spring. It's again the same thing, but there's like 5 parts here. We don't want to have to put that back together. It's already in the right place. So shift click on all of these parts. That should do the trick. Right click, form new subassembly. Now it looks like we got everything. So go ahead, open up the subassembly. Again, let's find out where we are first. Shift click, fix all these components so that they don't move, and then save as. There we go. Now we can put that into our own. Back to middle stage again. Okay, so the big money example here is this bearing block on the side, because this would take some real time to put together. You've got bearing, a shoulder bolt, a spacer, this shaft in the middle, 2 more bearings, and some screws, and that's a lot of work. So let's try selecting everything here, see if we can get this as well. I click on the bearing, then hold down shift, click on everything else. Missed the shoulder bolt here. I need that. 4 screws, and then rotate the view around and get the nuts that are on the inside here. All right. Carefully right click, form new subassembly. we go. That's our subassembly. And let's drag it and see if we left anything behind. And yes, so ThriftyBot apparently turned these bearings into multiple pieces. So we don't necessarily need all of these bits, but let's try and get the inner race at least. So if you hit the undo button, we'll pick up the inner race of this bearing here. And we don't need to reform this or anything. You just take this and you drag it up. Yep, that's the subassembly we're looking for. So that got our inner race on that bearing. Undo, go back. And we'll get the inner race on this bearing as well. Drop that into the subassembly. And now this looks pretty good. We don't have to bring in the balls and the cages for them. All they're going to do is make a performance hit for us. So cool. Go ahead and open this bearing block subassembly. Let's fix all of the components and do a save as. Bearing block subassembly. And that's all there is to it. Now we've got these, we can use them in our own designs. And because we're not going to, use the motion that's within, we can just use these as a fixed part. We don't have to make any mates. So we can save a lot of time that way.